Good afternoon, Adelaide and the world. Welcome back to season 2 of the Cuppa with the Conversationalist. And yes, I'm back with my latte as always. Look, one of the big questions that's being posed at the moment is indeed our real estate market and what is going on. And to that end, I thought it was really important that I get an expert in that area. And my next guest is indeed that. And before I introduce him, I just want to go through some of his credibility here. He's a multiple winner of the Real Estate Institute Auctioneering Championships, residential salesperson in 2018, Golden Gavel Auctioneer Champion, and when he won that, he was the youngest to have won it. This gentleman now has, under his guidance, Toop and Toop has been inducted into the Real Estate Institute Hall of Fame for the third time and is the first agency to have achieved that. My guest this morning or this afternoon is none other than Bronte Manuel. Good afternoon, Bronte.
Good afternoon, Con.
Thank you very much for joining us, mate. As I said at the outset, the market is absolutely nuts at the moment, and we really wanted to talk to somebody that can give us an expert view, and you and your organisation is absolutely credible for that. Mate, when COVID first started, there was doom and gloom surrounding real estate, and they were talking about collapsing and prices plummeting, and it's the absolute reverse. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, so, I mean, with the media, they all work now. Like, I know our paper here locally works on clickbait advertising, right? So basically they have to put out a sensationalized story so that people will click on it and sign up as a member, because each journo now has a quota for that. So typically negativity sells better than positivity. So the minute COVID struck, it became, they had an absolute field day with respects to like negative media everywhere. And I remember it being 20 to 30% downturn was forecasted. Now I do remember it was in April, and I had a property in a prime suburb here, Turak Gardens, and that's a property that would have had a lot of offers. 3 of the offers which we had leading into the campaign closing, of those 3 offers, 2 of them pulled out. One said, I need to actually keep my staff, for the end of the year, and I think there's going to be a boom. I need to keep my company afloat. And then another one just said, look, we can't take the risk. We managed to maintain the other party, which was the lowest of the 3 offers. They bought the property that night because the vendor said, we can't take a risk in not actually, taking this. 2 days later, the other 2 offers reinstated their offer at 100,000 more than what we sold it for. So I called the owner and I said, hey, I'm just going to be transparent with you. And they said, well, you weren't to know, we weren't to know. And then the market just changed. So there was, for a period, the media were correct, probably about a week to a few days where we didn't know what was up and what was down. And then from that point onwards, we kept going, oh, that was pretty strong. Oh, that was a pretty good result. That was a pretty good result. Oh my goodness, we're in COVID, and just see what got achieved there. And now that's just kept, the momentum just kept building and building and building and building to the point now, we rock up to an auction. Let's just say 6 months ago, it was worth 800. Now you'd say it's probably worth 920. And if it sells for over $1 million, do we walk away surprised? Not really. It's just crazy times, So what's happening? Why is that all being caused? Look, it's all a bit of a guessing game, but supply and demand. Last year, we closed out 36% less stock. This is the industry as a company. Yeah. Thank goodness our volumes weren't down that much, but 36% right across the board, less stock, right? So there's buyers are now competing against each other as opposed to properties competing against each other. So we've got a tremendous amount of buyers come into the market because believe it or not, JobKeeper in our market, top end market of Adelaide, JobKeeper really did put a lot of extra cash in a lot of business owners because a lot of people qualified for it. But also, hey, I don't know if I'm talking out of school, but the amount of people I've spoke to that qualified for it, but also did really well through COVID, so they've got surplus cash.
Absolutely.
We've got people moving from the eastern states. So there's people that are, they might be on 250 grand a year in Sydney. And the only reason they ever moved away from Adelaide was to go to Sydney for career opportunity.
Yep.
Now their employer's gone, you know what? You can work from Adelaide and you're still on 250 grand a year. Oh, okay, great. So median sale price now of $1 million in Sydney, and now it's 500 in Adelaide. You can imagine what they can buy for their money. So when they look at a property that us locals think is expensive at 950, it's cheap. Then there's a lot of people moving from overseas for the same purpose, that they've moved over there for career opportunity. Adelaide is a little bit sleepy. People call us a country town. They've hung stuff on us, for so long.
Yeah.
But truth be told, they've always wanted to live here. They just didn't have the career opportunity, and now they can do that from, their lounge room.
Yeah. Mate, hearing reports, even as recently as over the weekend, a property in Unley that was the reserve, I think, was 1 or 1.1 and sold for 1.4. Now, we're seeing, and again, a report I'm quoting from the ABC from the other night, that we're seeing growth that we've not seen in over 30 years. Now, this is not sustainable, surely.
I ask myself the question all the time, and I can say this, and this might knock my credibility a bit, but we were looking for an investment property, and Jen and I have gone, we need to buy, it's time for us to buy another investment property, and this was, sort of probably August last year, and I said, Jen, let's just wait to the end of the year or start of next year. I think the market might cool down a bit. And I reckon we've cost ourselves 10 or 15%. So right now, the market is bouncing, but I keep evaluating it. And unlike cryptocurrency, you can have $10 million, 10 million people sell $1,000 worth of cryptocurrency because Elon Musk puts up a bad tweet about it. And then bang, it drops, or he puts a positive tweet and it pumps up.
Yep.
We're not finding people. There was a time where a lot of international buyers were buying Australian property and South Australian property as a little bit of a trophy to say, hey, look, we own this piece of Australia. And when they wanted to dump those, it did soften our market. But we're finding most of our buyers are owner-occupiers. They're not people that are pumping and dumping. They're not people that are, buying to make a quick buck and sell out. They're people that are wanting a roof over their head for their children. So for that reason, I've got faith that, if it slowed down, it would go quieter. It would not, drop. But in saying that, we've never seen an upshot like this. This is an eastern, states upshot. So does it mean we get an eastern states downturn? I just think based on the type of people buying properties, and particularly in the eastern suburb belt here of Adelaide, I can't foresee that. And I think as long as interest rates are lower for the next 2 to 3 years, and I was talking to an economist the other day, and, I think we're all sort of thinking 2 to 3 years we've got left to run. But do we maintain double-digit growth for 2 to 3 years? I mean, wow, sounds good, but that'll be pretty full on.
I mean, if that were the case, I mean, these properties that are 1.3, 1.4, if they continue on the growth path that they're on, they're talking 1.7, 1.8 in 2 years. And if you look back, it's going to represent, potentially 40, 50, 60% growth in 4 years. It's, I mean, logic tells me that that's just not sustainable. And I get the interest rate thing, and you're absolutely right. And again, reports that I'm seeing out of the Reserve Bank, they're talking probably 4 years before they start looking interest rate rises. And even then, they'll be very, very minimal, you would suggest. Are people overcommitting? Is that potentially an issue here?
Well, what we're also finding is that, the banks aren't assessing people at 2.8% or 2.6% or 2.2%. The assessment rate's like 5.5%. So the bank, when you go to get a loan, they say, we're going to work out, if you're borrowing $1 million, we're going to work that out on a basis of you paying 5.5%. And also the expenses they have to sustain your family and the dependents, et cetera, are quite high, and typically higher than the average household. So on a very generic level, I would say unless interest rates surpass 5.5%, which the banks are assessing the affordability on, then I don't think we're going to have an issue with that. Where I do think it would play a part is at the moment, there's properties that are positive. So typically you either get a property that's negatively geared in a high growth suburb because the growth outweighs the negative gear. You either buy a positively geared property in a country town, but it never actually goes up in value, but it doesn't matter because you're getting cash flow, or you get both positively geared and you get high growth, but you're in Karratha. So if the mine goes bang, you've got no asset at the end of it, right?
Yep.
At the moment in Adelaide, you can be in, Prospect, which is a really growth area of Adelaide, and you can be positively geared. So from an investment perspective, if interest rates went up to 4 or 5%, which I still don't think are that high, it would become more of a negatively geared asset. So if we had heaps of people, full to the eye brim of debt buying investment properties, we might be in danger. But I'm just not seeing the investment property market. Like, yes, the investors are paying more than they ever were, but there's just too many owner occupiers that are prepared to pay more and ending up on top. So I don't think the interest rate thing will, typically, affect it. I really don't. The only thing that gives me confidence in our market as well is that we are so cheap in comparison to Melbourne and Sydney. If we were a Sydney market where you're 13 times the average household income for a mortgage, and you were to say we're going to have a 60% growth, I would say, well, are you trying to tell me that means we're going to go to 15 or 16 times the multiple of household income? That's not sustainable. We're like 8. So we're so far behind. Are we growing, or are we just playing catch up? That is the question. Because up until this point, you needed to leave here to get a job for more than, say, $80,000. Now you can have a job and live in Adelaide, and you can be on $250,000 that you used to have to move to Sydney for. So there's been some real game changing. And I was always saying that it would only be a matter of time that people would be able to work from Adelaide and do those jobs. But I was thinking that was 5 years away. So I don't think COVID's changed anything. I think it's actually just brought that timeline forward and brought it forward to now. And there could be 5 years worth of people that would have slowly drip fed back here to work from home that have all of a sudden, bang, we can now work from home and move back to Adelaide.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, valid point. Are we playing catch up? Because you're right. For years and years and years, we've been so far behind the Eastern Seaboard. The question then is, are they overvalued, and are we catching up to overvalue? I don't know. But going back to interest rates, mate, and you're way too young to remember, but you've probably read about it in the archives, mate. Late 80s, early 90s, mortgage rates were 18%. People complaining about 4s, 5s, and 6s, they got no idea. For the first 6 years of my career, I actually sold in a country town where I grew up called Loxton, down in the Riverland of South Australia. Beautiful place in the world. Yeah, and we would normally do around 80 to 90 sales per annum, in that marketplace. Well, that was the total sales, right? Because it's a small town. And there was 2 years where there was 1 sale and 3 sales, followed by then a massive amount of sales. And the 1 sale and 3 sales was obviously when these interest rates were on. You know what I mean? Like, everyone was there, and the banks, I think, held off. And then 2 years later, bang, either the banks moved in or the interest rates changed. I don't know, but then volume came. So if we get interest rates, I don't know. I still do a lot of calculation on 5 to 7%. That's what seems normal to me. Like, based upon when I entered the market, around that 5 to 7. And what we're experiencing at the moment is crazy. It's just cheap. Yeah, absolutely. And I do tend to agree with you. I think 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there is where the natural lie of the land, so to speak. Mate, tell us again, reports that we're seeing where, and I've got a few mates that are in the real estate industry, they're selling properties before the even for sale sign goes up. And of course, there's other reports about consumers who are looking to buy a property and they're like missing out all over the place. What advice, what recommendations would you have for a prospective purchaser of a property?
Yeah, so the number one thing I would say is just keep stepping up to the plate, right? And I know that sounds easier than it is because it's annoying. You waste every single weekend meeting agents who you don't like, and it ruins your lifestyle. But just keep rocking up to the plate. There was a property in Prospect, going back to personal experience. The agent was quoting 650. I said to Jen, you're going to be going, wow, you don't give Jen any good advice. But I said to Jen, hey, look, that thing's going to go for 9. That's going to 100% go for 9. And at 900,000, it'll be positively geared, right? This agent's got it completely wrong. So we didn't rock up, and I've gone, we could probably pay 8 to 850 would make sense, but it's going to go for over 9. Let's not worry about it. It's a waste of our time. And it sold for 820, so there are times where if you don't step up to the plate, you're going to miss the opportunity. And we're starting to see buyers now come through and go, we're going to leave it for like 6 to 9 months. So this is just too ferocious. We're sick of it. We're sick of agents. We're sick of missing out on property. It's emotionally taxing.
Yep.
But you know what? If it keeps happening, in 9 months' time, you're gonna have lost, on a $900,000 property, you're gonna have lost $90,000 in equity space. So just keep rocking up to the plate. Number one. Number two, I just think be really bullish in your approach. Be really bullish, because the amount of times we had a property recently that was advertised for around 1.5, we can set our reserve 10% above. And given this massive amount, it was actually advertised for 1.6, sorry. And given the amount of massive interest we had, we actually set the reserve at 1,760,000, right? So you can set it 10% above.
Yeah, yep.
There was a pre-auction offer of 1.8, which is 40,000 above what you can legally put the maximum reserve at. The owners were going, oh, do we sell it? Do we not? Hummed and hard. Went back to the buyer and said, you need to do a little bit better to really try and get the owners to terminate this campaign. They said, no, there's no way, we'll go to auction, and we sell it for 2,110,000 on auction day. Now that owner on the morning of auction day was so like, oh my goodness, did we make a bad decision? Did we not? Whereas if that buyer just came in and said at 1.9 or at 1.85 or 1.9, I know that sounds crazy, they would have saved, $210,000. So I think, if you go, you know what, I'm going to go to a crazy number, just submit a pre-auction offer. Just submit an offer on that first weekend. And if they take it, they take it. And if they don't, they don't. And it's not like you've let any cards out, because there's no guarantees you're going to be there on auction day at that price anyway. And the agent will tell the owners that. So A, keep stepping up to the plate. B, just be hyper bullish. Don't think, the only thing worse than thinking you overpaid for a property is knowing that you missed out on it for 5 or 10,000. So just go hard, really, is all I can say.
Yeah. Good advice. And on the other hand, for prospective sellers, is now the time, or do they wait, or what do they do?
Look, what I say to that question, is that we obviously, no one's got a crystal ball, right? But if the market keeps running, if it does keep running in double digits, if you sell your property in 2 years' time, you'll sell it for more than now. But on the same token, everyone's saying this can't be sustainable. And is it sustainable? Is it not? Who knows? All we know is right now, the market is amazing. So if it was me personally, I'm not a gambler. I would just be getting my property on the market right now, especially if I was looking to downsize, because if you're looking to downsize, say you get 10% more on your $1 million property, and you pay 10% more on a $500,000 property, you know what I mean? You've got 100,000 more here, and you've paid 50 more there. You've made $50,000 additional equity. So if you're buying and selling in the same market, though, like you might pay more here, less there. It doesn't tend to matter too much.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I guess the other question that I have is, obviously, in terms of area geography, obviously, your eastern suburbs, Prospect, Unley, and the like. Are there any other areas that are experiencing either that massive amount of over the top, or other areas that prospective buyers could look at that still represent value, but aren't having those ridiculous amounts above reserve?
So at the moment, if you look at sort of 5 kilometre radius around the city, there's not really any suburb that's not seeing massive amount of people lined up at the door, because one thing that's happened with low stock is, if I say Evandale to people in Adelaide, they kind of go, oh, where's Evandale? Oh, it's next to Maylands. Oh, I know where Maylands is. Oh, it's next to Royston Park. I know where Royston Park is. Across the road from, Payne and Payne. Oh, no, it's like a hidden gem. Right now, there's no stock. Everyone knows every little intricate suburb that's ever been, because they're just scrolling online, right? But what I've always said is, wherever there's an explosion, go the next 1 or 2 suburbs out, because in Adelaide, when Walkerville was going nuts, I was saying buy in Vale Park. Oh, I don't want to live in Vale Park. There's too much of this. There's too much of that. I don't want to live there. And now everyone's saying I should have bought in Vale Park. Then when Vale Park was going bang, I was going, you need to buy in Clemsig. I'm not buying in Clemsig. Da, da, da. And now they're all going, I should have bought in Clemsig. Now, right now, I'm saying buy in Windsor Gardens. And they're saying, nah, wouldn't live there. And then I guarantee you in a year's time, they're going to be saying I should have bought in Windsor Gardens. So, right, there's a suburb in Adelaide. There's a suburb in Adelaide called Kilkenny. And people can be a little bit snobby about Kilkenny, go, oh, Kilkenny, I'm not sure about that. But West Croydon, there's literally there's a Roona road that literally divides the two, which is not a main road at all. And what you pay for on one side of Roona, let's just call it a masonette might be $580, like a character one. In Kilkenny, it might be, mid threes to high fours, right? That disparity can't ever last. It happened with Prospect and Kilburn. The disparity becomes so big that it closes, and then the key suburb goes up again, and then it closes, right? So on the weekend, we were there at Kilkenny, 422 square metre block, a bungalow type property, would have been 700,000 6 months ago, and it sold for 18. So, it's just starting to go, but I still think there's enough time to get in there. So just look at that next radius. Don't be scared of it. And the thing definitely with Adelaide is you want to brag about the when you want to brag about the suburb that you live in, it's nearly too late, whereas if you go, I live next to Prospect. Oh, where do you actually live? Kilburn. If you're not proud to say the suburb, then that's probably a good place to put money if it's right next to one where you are proud. I know that sounds snobby, but that's the psyche that works here.
Mate, you just talk about Kilburn, and I was a joke with a mate of mine. How could you live somewhere that's called Kilburn?
It's probably not ideal. And there has been some situations where that's exactly happened.
But you're absolutely right in what you're saying. And you tell people these things and then they go, no, I don't want to live there. It's a bit like, again, years ago, you could buy beachside suburbs for a fraction of what they are now. You go, oh, God, I don't want to live there. And then it was Glenelg. Then Glenelg went to, Henley. And then, what about Semaphore? Oh, I'm not living at Semaphore. And now go and get a property at Semaphore that's beachside. And it's the same thing over and over again. Mate, it's been enlightening to say the least, our chat this morning or this afternoon. And I absolutely know that the listeners and the viewers will get tremendous value. I mean, I've been making notes over here for myself, and definitely a lot of value for our listeners. Just before we end up, Bronte, is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything of value that you think you could add to this conversation for the audience?
Oh, look, I'm not so certain. I think we're very fortunate in Australia in the way that we've handled COVID, and as a result of it, and with surplus funds, there's a lot of people with a lot of money out there right now, and I think I think no matter which way you look at it, we're very fortunate. And if you're an owner that owns a property and you're considering selling, I think this could be a once in a lifetime spike for you to take advantage of that. So I think you're very fortunate. And if you're a buyer, I guess definitely in our market, I don't think we typically peak and trough, we peak and plateau. So I think for the sake of your family, if you need to pay a little bit more, if you pay 50 more than what you think it's worth, what's 50 grand over the scheme of 20 years of enjoyment? So you would buy a car for 50 grand knowing it's going to be worth 10 grand when you trade it in, but you won't pay 50 more for something that you live in 24/7. So I think just go for it and buy something, and don't worry about overpaying. I know that sounds easy for me to do. I've always thought I've overpaid for things, and then 12 months later, I'm thinking, oh, actually, we did all right.
And you're right. At the end of the day, it's not. We need to look at it long game rather than short game. And it's funny how, from a psychological perspective, we're happy to blow 40, 50 grand on a car, knowing that you're going to drive it off the lot and it's going to have dropped 20% in value. But we're trying to screw the vendor for 10 grand on a, $800,000-900,000 property that we intend to hang on to for 20 years. We're funny human beings, we are.
And one last thing I probably would say really quickly is I believe the world is changing, and there's going to be Zoom hubs, and the proximity to the city may not necessarily be as important as it currently is. However, the proximity to the city is typically does reflect how nice the suburb looks and what amenities and facilities they've got as well. But the one thing I think is here to stay, and if I was to use one thing to determine where and what suburb I live in, is school zones. You know, I believe you're still going to have to drop your children off at school. The public schooling system, if you can get into a really good public school zone, not only is that amazing for your family, and obviously the convenience to get them into the school and the convenience of dropping them off at the school, but also I believe that economically itself can spike a suburb and will continue to spike and have more importance in the future.
Wow. Never even thought of that. Never even thought of that. And of course, my kids are grown up, so why would I think about it? But to the parents out there that do have young children, it makes absolutely perfect sense. Bronte, it's been an absolute pleasure this morning. Thank you for your expert and really valuable insights. Listeners and viewers, obviously Toop and Toop, award-winning real estate agents nationally. If you've got any questions, I would encourage you to get in contact with Bronte or one of their team. Again, Bronte, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time, and have a fantastic day.
Thanks a lot, Con. Take care.
Cheers.